For Krima Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. ANC stalwart Kulumbata discusses his latest book, Unmasked, Why the ANC Failed to Govern. Your book, titled Unmasked, Why the ANC Failed to Govern, reflects on the failure of the ruling party in its 22 years of governing South Africa, to honor the values of the Freedom Charter and to come to terms with the Charter's precepts for running economy. Do you not think that the ANC has made some progress in starting the process of building a non-racial democratic society in South Africa?
Thank you for that question. Let me deal with the first part of your question. While in my book I do deal with the Freedom Charter, I make it clear that I'm not looking at the ANC failing to implement the ideals that are contained in the Freedom Charter. This book looks at a very complex nature of issues that have had an impact and influence on the ANC, both as a liberation movement then and as a political party in government now. And what are these issues that I'm looking into the ANC? I'm looking at how the ANC was disorganized when it was banned in the 1960, because the leadership was arrested, taken to jail. The leadership, part of the leadership was forced into exile, part of the leadership was forced underground. So there was no structure, organizational structure, that remained intact. The ANC had to reorganize itself as an organization in exile under different conditions that existed here in South Africa. So the problems it confronted outside South Africa were quite different. It had to start from scratch. So I'm looking at these complex issues. But the ANC was hosted in different countries. It was part and parcel of the anti-imperialist struggle. So it was therefore influenced by ideologies that were in line with its ideals. So I'm looking at the complex ideological influences on the ANC. I also look at the ANC as an organization that had to fulfill its mission executing an armed struggle. There were challenges there that the ANC faced that made it practically impossible to wage a guerrilla warfare on South African territory. That in itself influenced the culture and the tradition of doing things within the organization. As you may understand, in the liberation movement, tasks and duties are not given to you because as a councillor, for example, you are elected by the people to represent them. It's not done that way in the liberation movement. So that culture also became part and parcel of the ANC. So I'm looking at that, I'm saying, was this liberation movement ready to take over government in 1994? Because running a liberation or heading and leading a liberation movement is totally different from running a political party that is in government. So these challenges, because to have a government that can fulfill the ideals and wishes of the people, you have to have educated and skilled people, skilled in the departments where people are deployed in education, in health, in the economy, and so on. You have to have this. And for a liberation movement of the nature that we had, it was very impossible to address these aspects. So we can say that I ask the question, was the ANC ready to govern? But let me deal with the other aspect. You say, you ask if I'm not considering that the ANC has tried to address some of the issues in building a non-racial. I think the African National Congress has done a lot in this country, especially in laying down the basis for our people to live together, black and white. You'll agree with me, looking at the past 23 years since the ANC has been in power, that there is much to be done. And the things that would have accomplished, education, health services, and so on, we have failed to address some of the basic issues. Today, we sit with a dysfunctional economy. We are almost junk status. We took an economy, we built it, it did function. If you look at the years that Mandela left government in 1999 and President Thabo Mbeki took over, we built. But now the economy is almost destroyed. The education and health systems are not meeting the demands on the ground. Unemployment is at its highest point. To create jobs, we cannot meet the ideals for which many of our people have laid their lives for.
Do you think that we have been well placed to criticize the ruling party? And do you think that the ANC is capable of self-correction at this stage?
Yeah, I think to be blunt, I've seen it all. I've been a child of the ANC. I schooled through the efforts of the ANC, and I came, most of my part of my working life was dedicated to both the ANC and government. And I was at the highest office. When you are in the president's office, you have an oversight. And Kgalema Motlanthe, as deputy president of both the ANC and the country, was responsible for government business, which means an oversight over all departments, over all ministers in government. So that gives one an advantage over other departments or other people. So you know exactly what issues the ministers, deputy ministers are confronted with, the issues that confront the director generals of the departments. You know how they try to resolve the issues that they are confronting. You know the good and bad. And you are called upon also to advise what best solutions can one find. So I think, yes, I'm in a better position to look critically at the performance of government.
How did the idea of writing this book came about, and who should be reading it?
I started writing this book in 1987 when I was in Lusaka. I was writing it for our people, for all our people, young and old, black and white. Then I thought I'll be telling the story of the ANC as a liberation movement. And I did write that story. But when I presented it to the publishers, they said it's too much. They just want to know about the ANC now and the problems it is confronting now. The other part, maybe it will be unmasked too. So after I left government, when Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe left office in 2014, I then dedicated from June up to this year, 2.5 years, I dedicated it to this book.
You dedicated this book to the 3 friends you grew up with in Soweto who lost their lives while fighting for liberation in exile. Tell us about how you were recruited to the ANC.
The events of 1976 were preceded by a lot of what I will call student dissatisfactions about Africans, about education, and that I was myself at university, but I had gone through high school, and it is at high school that one came to know that there is something wrong in the manner that black people are fulfilling their lives in South Africa. So, whereas we did discuss, there was nothing that happened. I think by 74, 75, with the impact of the black consciousness movement on students' affairs, it then inspired those who were in the leadership position to take this struggle a bit further. And then June 16 happened. So I dedicate this book to the 3, but it's actually to all those who suffered. The 3 came from where I grew up in Soweto. They were my neighbors. And all 3 had left South Africa. We left at the same time. And all 3 never came back alive. They never enjoyed the freedom that we so cherish today. I'm saying this because they have families, they have people who love them. It is sometimes we forget that in whatever we're involved in, that there were people who had dedicated their lives so that the generations that will come after us can enjoy life. So in that way, they also an example of how life was in exile. One of them was arrested, was kidnapped from Maputo. One was killed in the ANC camps. So it's all that what the ANC was.
What was it like in the training camps when many trained cadres wanted to come back home, which sadly led to many casualties?
Let me answer that question this way. When I left South Africa, the task that I was faced with was, among us, there were very young friends who left with us. Some were 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old. And the African National Congress, when we arrived in Tanzania, made it clear that those who would want to continue with education, they must do so. Not everybody should go for military training. So I was given the task of implementing this decision by the leadership of the ANC. I was one of those who was tasked to separate those, to convince, because we all wanted to do military training. We all wanted to carry a gun. We all wanted to shoot at the enemy because of what we experienced, because the killing of Hector Peterson, then in 1976, it was something that had never happened in the history of South Africa. So we were very, very, very angry, and we wanted revenge. But through the encounter that we had with the leadership of the ANC, it became clear that we cannot send everybody for military training. So I happened to have been given that task, that I must look after those who want to go. That's why I say I became involved in political education. But indirectly, we were in touch with those in the camps, because wherever we were, especially in the GDR, in organizing international solidarity, we would raise funds, raise clothing, and we'll send it to Angola. I've been to the military camps a number of times. Although I was not being trained there, I was taking goods to our comrades.
How does it feel to criticize the ANC, the party that you once loved?
No, I think in a democracy, we should be able, not only ANC members, all people in South Africa have to live a critical life, because without that, then you don't have democracy. In a democracy, you have to make choices, and you can't make those choices properly if you are not critical. And therefore, the ANC is not an exception. If we are to be critical about our past is everything, ANC included, but also the past of living under apartheid. And that's why it is important that we deal with the present, the past, and the future in a very critical way. So I feel very comfortable, and my fellow South Africans should be encouraged, especially in the situation we find ourselves today. Many people don't know what to do. Right now, as I'm speaking, there's a constitutional court case that is dealing about the vote of no confidence against the ANC president. So if you are not critical about this, you would not know which direction to go.
You are also a member of the 101 ANC stalwarts who recently wrote a document titled "For the Sake of Our Future." What is the purpose of this intervention, and do you think it will succeed?
The intervention by the stalwarts of the ANC. Today, everybody belongs to a faction, because the ANC is factionalized. I joined the stalwarts of the ANC because they are the only faction, if we may call it that has no interest in occupying political office. I'm saying that because they are not interested in pushing people out of their positions. In that way, as former President Thabo Mbeki said, this is a group of people with an experience in the ANC before it was banned, in exile, in the jails of South Africa. They were there when Nelson Mandela declared South Africa to be free. So they have a lot of experience for which new generations can learn from them. Now, their intervention is of such nature that they say the ANC has reached a point of no return. It can no longer self-correct. All methods, efforts made to correct within the organizations have failed. The ANC was found by the Constitutional Court through its president, its members of parliament who had agreed that President Zuma must not pay a cent towards the building of Uganda, to have neglected their duties. Now, that's a serious accusation. Even after that, the ANC in parliament, the ANC as an organization did not take step to address this issue. Now, the stalwarts have come up to say, look, we need a national consultative conference whose task should do one thing, should be to address the shortcomings of the ANC as an organization. And in doing so, the stalwarts realized that we need help from outside the ANC. As I said at the beginning, the ANC did not have all the skills that we needed as a political and governing party in South Africa to run the country. But we have the best engineers in this country. We have the best teachers. We have the best qualified health people, doctors, and so on. But they are not in the ANC. They are not in the ANC. They can best advise the ANC how to deal with many issues. We can't have an organization that is led and has a government of people who don't have the expertise. So what are we saying? Are we building a nation? Do we want to be better in this world? Do we want to compete with the international community, both in the economic and political sphere? We must do it with our best people, qualified, skilled. It's not that we're short of these things. It's because these people are outside the ANC. The ANC should not be leading itself. The ANC was established in 1912 to lead the people of South Africa. If the ANC says it is the true representative of our people, it should not be in saying these things. It must be there in practice. It must be shown. And therefore, this is the intervention that the stalwart wanted to bring to contribute, because they know that for us to be free, like in 1994, the ANC played a role, but you know what? The people in this country played a role. The civic organizations, the churches, religious organizations, the street committees, the trade unions, all these people contributed for this country to be free. And therefore, we cannot claim that this country was liberated by the ANC. No, all its people liberated this country.
If you were to meet President Jacob Zuma, what would you say to him about the state of our country?
Well, I always meet with him, but I understand your question. I think we are going through trying times. You know, when you realize that there is no hope, you know, Comrade Ahmed Kanthrada, the late, who wrote the foreword to my book, which was the last writing he did in his life, said, what saddens him is that whereas our people in 94 had nothing, but they had hope that things will become better. Comrade Ahmed Kanthrada says, the worst that this leadership has done is to remove that hope. I think it is painful. If people have no hope that their lives will become better, why then pretend that you are doing that?
That was Kulumbata speaking to Krima Media's Polity about his book titled Unmasked, Why the ANC Failed to Govern.